decline, mental distress, blood pressure, and the rest of them. If you look at the long-term chronic disease, you will see what we call cardiovascular disease, accelerated brain aging, immune system suppression, and the rest of them. Okay. If you go to the next slide, take it, please. Can you help me?
Okay. Okay.
I'm having issues here.
Can you see it, Prof?
Yes, I can see it. Okay.
All right.
So health challenges caused by lack of adequate sleep could be, it is a long-term effect: obesity, type 2 diabetes, heart diseases, high blood pressure, and weakened immune system. All this, in some researchers will tell you that this reduces lifespan of a person. So as professionals, we have to be very careful, and the way we work, how this affects our sleep. Okay, next slide please. Then effective tips for better sleep: you have to manage electronics. Most of us are having issue with electronic devices. Some of us sleep with our phone, sleep with laptops. Some are also working at home, instead of sleeping. So all these things, particularly at night, all these things affect, you know proper and adequate sleep. Then you have to also create a avenue where you can have proper sleep. Okay, so that your bedroom shouldn't be a place of watching movies, and the rest of them should be a place of rest. Okay, of course, how you eat also is in plays another key role. Next slide please. Then statistically, it's observed that globally, most countries, people don't sleep very well. It's only few countries that has, good record of sleeping for at least for 7 hours. Among these countries are Netherlands, New Zealand, France, Australia. Okay, of course, this is just, it varies from place, year to year. For the past 10 years, Netherlands and New Zealand has been consistent sleeping for more than 7 hours a day. But others, US, UK, all these people, in fact, Japan is among the worst. Okay, next slide, please. New Zealand. Next slide.
I wish you had that. Yes. For Nigeria.
For Nigeria, we don't have proper statistics or database. That's why I didn't want to go and mention Nigeria. It's just something we as professionals should look at, on our own. How long do you sleep a day? How is your sleeping pattern? Most of us now, personally, me, I'm watching the World Cup, so at night I don't sleep properly because you have to keep awake to watch, because of the different time zones, to watch what is happening. Okay, so generally BBC experts advise that we should maintain a quality time sleep. There should be a scheduled time for sleeping and waking up. Okay, and this should be from Monday to Sunday, not just weekend. You shouldn't readjust. The other one is removing all these distractions like phones. All this, some people sleep with their phone and it's not really healthy. Then the other one is use of naps. In fact, country that sleeps have naps most times are usually Spain, Italy, and Greece. But because of time, I wouldn't go into that. Then exercise. You must exercise to keep fit. So you must keep exercise. So World Sleep Day was held in 13th March 2026, and the theme was sleep well, live better. Okay, so as professionals, we should consider our sleeping time as very important, at least minimum 7 hours a day. Okay, I think I'll stop there for now. I'm Leonard, technical director for Awka Owerri chapter. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Prof. I think, Prof, I need to come and meet you personally on this sleeping so that I'll know how to reduce my weight. All right. Thank you, Professor Leo Onumba, for the safety briefing. I believe we must have learned one or two in order to enhance our health and also improve our immune system, as he said. So we'll quickly move over to the Okorie chapter coordinator, Dr. Ifeanyi Chunko, who is going to tell us the welcome address and announcements of NAPI Okorie new executive members. Please, Dr. Chunko, the Awka Owerri chapter coordinator. Please, sir.
Thank you so much, George. Thank you. Thank you, Professor Leo Onoba. But you have touched what concerned me. So, and I know that every one of us on call this year, 30 tips is a nice one. Thank you so much. So, without wasting our time, from our end here, we have schools that have been running this association to make sure that Okorie chapter is in line with what NAPE has for the entire world. So from the coordinator, which is myself, Dr. Chunko, to Dr. Chioma Madawese, then to Dr. Sabinus Ibeneme, who is our secretary, Dr. Rita, our stand secretary, Chibuza Haneku, then Professor Leon Oba, our technical director, Dr. Austin Okonkwo, who is our treasurer, Dr. Chema Kevin, our financial secretary, then our George Okeke, the YP lead, then Dr. Kristen Dim, the immediate past coordinator, and Dr. Adobe Okeke. So, and one of our advisory council nominee, which is Professor Bat Ozumba, who has been of great support to this chapter. So we are truly happy to have every one of us on call, and we say kindly join us and as we pilot the affairs of this association from our end here in Okorie chapter. There are some of the activities that have been held by our universities, our YP Isaacs. There have been a lot of activity that is ongoing, and there's one that we are going to be coming up this August, and some of the one that I've heard previously as shown above. And previously, some of our key personnel, our supporters, and our members from Okorie chapter, someone like Dr. David Anomneze, who is going to be the chairman of the day today, then down to Professor, our great daddy, Professor Wajide. So all of them receive an award during the NAPE at 50 celebration. And Okorie chapter is really amazed of what they are doing. So we give God glory. Then coming from previously as geoscientists, we say that we can never talk of the present without talking about the past. So within the year, we have heard through previous technical business meeting, the one that was held in March, and it was anchored by Alex Oshodi from Gevical Energy, and he spoke on hydrocarbon prospectivity in the Anambra Basin, and it was chaired by Mr. Emeka Ejika, FNAPI. So, and the attendance, the individual attendance was very, very high. Then we also have our second one for the year that was anchored by Dr. Onyeji John Bosco Azubike, who addressed on addressing optimal wellbore placement of certainties in deep-seated Pespatic sandstone reservoir. And it was chaired by Professor Iman Akoba. And that day, I think that all our participants were filled with food that they cannot forget about. Then coming to today, to the present, which is what we have today, we shall have one of our finest lady in the oil and gas sector, Victoria Nneka Okorie, who is a senior technical geoscientist / modeler / stratigrapher within Chevron Nigeria Limited. She will be talking on what the data cannot tell you. And I believe whoever that missed today's presentation is going to have an issue because she's coming from experience and she will just give it out to us on a platter of gold, on the platform of NAPE. And we must commend NAPE for this great opportunity. And we must commend Chevron for allowing her to share this with us. And we are truly grateful. And we also thank our chairman for the day, Dr. Dave Anomneze, who is a senior production geoscientist at Seplat Energy. Thank you so much. Thank you, Seplat, for also allowing him to do this great event. And I will not waste our time because I know that what our presenter have for us today will be so immense that all of us will be happy about it. So without wasting our time, let me hand over to our our PE. Our Madam President is not available, and I believe and the VP is also not on call. So my PE, sir, please, so I don't know if you can take over and just give us the opening remark, then the subsequent thing that that is necessary for the president to carry out. PE, sir.
Okay. Thank you very much, Okorie, chapter coordinator. Is the VP on the call? Do we have the vice president on the call?
It's not on the call. I checked.
Okay, fine. That's fine. You know, I mean, for those who do not understand, the hierarchy in NAPI is always president, vice president before the president elects. So, in the absence of the two persons, maybe, yes, I'll step in and then do a kind of welcome remark or opening remark, sorry. So, first, I want to thank Okorie for putting this together. I want to thank the speaker, Mrs. Victoria. I mean, I know why I say she's super wonderful. I know why I say that, and perhaps she knows too. Thank you very much for taking up this challenge to present today. And also the chairman of the occasion, Dr. Dave. I mean, somebody I know again, and I say super stuff to Dave because he's also one of my super guys in the committees. In fact, the reason why I'm saying all this is these two guys are in the committee, subcommittee of the planning, conference planning, and then they are doing wonderfully well in their various committees. And then for me to see them again on this technical presentation for the Okorie chapter group, I think they are simply amazing and they are doing wonderfully well for NAPI. Having said that, I am certain that the topic, what the data cannot tell you, coming from Mrs. Victoria, we know what it means. She's going to tell us all that she wants to tell us on that topic. We'll sit down, relax, and listen to her. After the presentation, I'll come back again to say one or two things. So having said that, I also want to thank those who have tuned in, those who are online to listen to the presentation. And then let's just make best part of this best part of our time listening to this presentation so that at the end of the day, we'll be happy for it. Thank you very much. I'll yield back to the coordinator to go ahead. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, our able PE, Dr. Anthony Ofoma. Please, I would like you to do us the honor to also recite the citation of our chairperson, Dr. David Anomneze. PE, sir, please.
All right, thanks. I'll quickly go ahead and do that. So, Mr. David Anomneze is a senior production geologist with Seplat Energy. Okay, a distinguished senior production geologist. Dave holds a BSc in geology, MSc in applied geophysics, and then PhD in petroleum geology with distinction. MBA and executive education from INSEAD, which is INSEAD Business School. Dave has played key roles in the NAPI Conference Planning Committee. Yeah, as if I knew. He has played. That's what he wrote there. But I said he is still playing. He's playing very big role in the planning committee, and I applaud him for that. Thanks, Dave, for all you're doing. Serving as secretary for both the opening ceremony and pre-conference workshop planning subcommittees. Currently, he chairs the repertoire subcommittee of NAPI 2024, and I think he's also going to chair that repertoire. I think he's also chairing it for 2026. That's why I said he's really, really committed. And these subcommittees that he has mentioned are the core committees for the conference. For any conference, these are core: opening ceremony, pre-conference workshop. That's where you generate your communique, and then the repertoire. So, I mean, he is just there, overseeing the documentation and review of communiques from the annual pre-conference workshop. Thanks, Dave, for all you do. Dave has gained expertise spanning the full upstream oil and gas life cycle, from exploration to development, asset management, JV, and regulatory interface management. Career history: span from he's currently a senior production geologist at Seplat. Past roles include geologist position at Monipulo Limited and Lesa Engineering, held geologist position in Erin Energy and Nubian Group. Ah, okay, you were in Erin and Nubian, good one. Then early career started as a graduate intern geologist at SPDC. Dave also was part of the NAPE Young Geologists of the Decade. That is his awards. NAPE Young Geologists of the Decade, Industry Sustainability Award, Seplat, CEO Best Team Award, and Best Geology Paper Presenter. It's like Dave is like me. Oh, Dave, congratulations to you on all this. And then permit me to welcome to you all the chairman for this occasion, Mr. David Anomneze. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, the PE.
Thanks a lot, PE. Thanks a lot to the executive of NAPE Awka Owerri chapter. Please confirm if you can hear me.
Yes, please.
We can
All
hear
right,
you.
thank you. Yeah, so I think it's a honor to stand before you today as the chairman of this technical meeting. To me, I feel very privileged to be, chairing this occasion. More with the fact that our speaker today is a very special person in the industry and someone who is well recognized for her both geoscience impact and her community impact within the NAPE space. So I'll just go right in to give us a brief citation around Victoria's profile. So the speaker for today is Victoria Nneka Okorie. She's a senior technical geoscientist at Chevron Nigeria Limited with over 2 decades of experience in the energy industry. Her career spans exploration, development, production, supporting complex technical, deep water, and shallow marine assets. Her work focuses on integrating subsurface science with analytical and data-driven approaches. She's a certified data scientist. Beyond technical practice, Victoria has contributed to executive and organizational level, having served as special assistant to the chairman and managing director at Chevron Nigeria Limited, where she supported executive coordination, strategic alignment, and stakeholder management. She has also held leadership roles within the professional community, including assistant editor-in-chief of the NAPE. She previously served as communication coordinator for Women Employee Network at Chevron and as lead for technical programs in the Women in Geoscience and Engineering Committee, supporting technical capacity building, mentorship, and leadership development across the profession. Victoria holds a bachelor's of science in geology from Nnamdi Azikiwe University, an MBA from Heriot-Watt University, and a leadership certification from Harvard University, and a specialization in data science from the US. Our professional journey reflects a strong commitment to team collaboration, continuous learning, and the responsible application of subsurface science, analytics, and leadership to address complex energy and organizational challenge. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me to make welcome our guest speaker for today, Victoria Nneka Okorie. So please, Victoria, you can have the floor for your presentation.
All right, thank you very much. Confirm you can hear me okay?
Yes, please.
Yes, we can.
Okay. All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much. I want to start off appreciating the NAPE Awka Owerri chapter for this invitation. And I see all that you do, the great work you do, all of your continued commitment to, advancing both our technical and business dimension of our profession. I see you, appreciate you. With professional bodies like NAPE, they play very, very, very vital role in ensuring that our learning extends beyond the workplace. And how do they do that? By what you're doing now. You're creating an environment where ideas, experiences get shared, where the younger folks can learn from those that have been through that path before. I see you, we appreciate you. I also want to acknowledge Chevron Nigeria Limited for her continued support. Chevron continues to support us in terms of professional development, in terms of knowledge share like we're doing right now, in terms of industry engagement like we're doing right now. Thank you, Chevron. Now, I'd like to begin with what may sound somewhat like a bold statement, and here's it. I believe that the oil and gas industry has largely solved any problem that has to do with data scarcity. And here's why. Think about it. I mean, some 30 years ago, many of our predecessors interpreted using sparse 2D data, seismic, of course. Then we had well control that was limited. Processing capacity then was, or capability then was modest. Computing resources, they were very constrained at the time. Talk about storage capability. It was way expensive at that time. Interpretation itself was pretty slow. You can go to the next slide, please. Yes, leave it there. Thank you. Now, let's fast forward to today. We routinely work with broadband seismic. We have the wide azimuth, acquisition. We have high density surveys, machine learning assisted interpretation. We have advanced rock physics. Geobody extraction is a thing of every day. Real-time drilling information, we get that with the click of a button. And now there's even digital twins. There's cloud computing. There's integrated interpretation platforms. You name them. I mean, the list goes on. Never in the history of our industry have geoscientists had access to this volume of information. Yet, have our decisions improved proportionally? Could we beat our hand on the chest to say yes? Could we ask ourselves, have exploration outcome improved at exactly the same rate as this technology continues to advance? Have all these additional data sets eliminated uncertainty? Have they eliminated dry holes? Or have they eliminated surprises during development drilling? I suspect that everyone here already knows the answer. At least I know the answer is no. Not because our technology has failed, far from it. To be honest, technology has transformed our profession. It has allowed us to image deeper reservoirs. It has helped us to improve the resolution of our seismic. We characterize increasingly very complex geological settings. We evaluate opportunities faster than we did in the past. So truly, technology has made us better. But technology has not replaced judgment. And why is that? Because somewhere between acquiring data, drilling a well, something profoundly human still happens. And I'll give an example. Someone needs to decide what interpretation is more plausible. Someone must determine which uncertainty matters the most. Someone would have to decide which geological model deserves confidence. Again, someone must decide which opportunity justifies an investment. Now, all of these questions cannot be answered by seismic amplitude alone. They cannot be answered by software or any AI operating platform, independently at least. And why is that? Because they get answered by people, you and I. And that realization has become increasingly important, even to myself, throughout my career journey. Because when I reflect on most of the projects that, for me, has ultimately created significant value, I rarely conclude that the success came simply because we possessed more data than everyone else. More often than not, I've come to realize that success emerged because someone noticed something others overlooked. Someone challenged and accepted interpretation. Because someone integrated information differently. Someone asked a better geologic question. Someone communicated uncertainty very honestly and very effectively. This happened because someone persuaded an organization or an institution to consider an opportunity that otherwise would have been ignored. Now, all of these moments are not technologically I would not call them technological breakthroughs, no. For me, they were moments of human judgment. And that brings us to today's central idea, the competitive advantage that we have in modern geoscience that is no longer about access to data. For me, it is the quality of human thinking that we get applied onto this data. Because some of the greatest opportunities in our profession, most times they emerge from what data tells us, yes? Sometimes they emerge from what data did not tell us. Most times they emerge from careful interpretation, which has allowed us to discover beyond it. This is what I'm hoping that we would explore together this afternoon, or is it this morning? If I were to ask now by a quick show of hands, how many of us have worked on a project where, despite having excellent seismic, excellent well control, excellent multidisciplinary team or inputs, the final result still surprised us? I'm sure you would say, I have experienced, or I have experienced, exactly. So that's where our conversation today would begin. What I plan to do as we progress this slide is that before I leave every slide, I would like to leave us with one key takeaway. So for this particular slide, it's our introduction slide, but it's gonna come with a keynote, and it's a key takeaway. And what is that? You see, modern geoscience is no longer constrained primarily by data availability. Let's take note of that. It is constrained by the quality of human interpretation and decision making. So if today's challenge is no longer simply acquiring more information, then the obvious next question becomes, how do we consistently transform information into better decision? That's the journey that I'd like us to take together over the next maybe 45 minutes or so. Next slide, please. All right. Now that we've established the premise of today's discussion, I would like to briefly walk us through the journey I think we should take together. I believe every good technical presentation should answer two key questions from the very beginning. The first is, where are we going? And perhaps even more importantly is, why should we even care? I believe we should, because once we understand the destination, every subsequent discussion begins to make sense. So let's think about where we're headed so that we go through each slide, it will be making sense. Today's presentation follows what I call a logical progression from data to interpretation to decision making. So that by the end of our discussion, I hope you would see that while data may initiate decision, it is human judgment that ultimately determines its quality. So we'll begin with what I like to call the exploration paradox. The word paradox fascinates me because it challenges one of our industry's most deeply held assumptions. You know, we tend to believe that more data should automatically produce better decision. Where you have more seismic, you have more wells, you have more computing power, you have more sophisticated algorithms, we have more machine learning. Yet, when we step back and examine the industry outcomes, at least over the past decades, the relationship is nearly not as straightforward as that. Our capability has grown exponentially, no doubt, but has certainty grown in that same direction? I don't think so. And that raises an important question. If data continues to improve, what exactly then remains difficult? So we'll spend more time exploring that question. From there, we'll move into a real seismic example, not because this presentation is intended to teach seismic interpretation, not at all, because I believe most people here already understand seismic interpretation. Instead, the example would help illustrate something more fundamental, it will try to demonstrate that every data set has limits. Every data set contains ambiguity. Every interpretation requires assumptions of some sort. And value often gets created not only by what the seismic reveals, but by how we integrate those subtle observations into the coherent geologic story. So as geoscientists, that's ultimately what we do. We transform observation into explanation. Now, having established that principle, we would broaden the discussion beyond seismic itself. Because after many years in our profession, I've become convinced that the most valuable capabilities, the ones we possess, are already listed on our competency matrix. Think about the skills we routinely put and we measure. We talk about software proficiency, we talk about structural mapping, yes, we're geologists, we talk about petrophysics, we talk about reservoir characterization, we talk about volumetrics. All of these are critically important. But are those the capabilities that consistently distinguish exceptional geoscientists? I'm not entirely convinced. Some of the qualities that create the greatest value, for example, I believe are judgment, pattern recognition, integrative thinking, influence, credibility. And you notice they are almost invisible, yet they quietly shape almost every important decision that we make. We'll explore that together. Next, we'll examine something that I believe every experienced professional has encountered at some point in their career: a technically robust interpretation that fails to become an organizational decision. Perhaps you've experienced it yourself, where a situation where geology was sound, the risking was actually appropriate, opportunity was compelling, the multidisciplinary team all supported the recommendation, yet that project stalled, or maybe funding disappeared, or management chose another opportunity, or the recommendation just kind of lost momentum. But why does that happen, you may ask yourself? Perhaps because between technical excellence and observational action, something lies in between, something that was often and most times gets overlooked. For example, trust, influence, communication, alignment. We'll explore what I refer to this as, I'll call it the trust gap, and why some technically superior ideas never become business decisions. We'll see that. From there, we'll turn the discussion inward, because eventually almost every geoscientist would encounter an important career transition, at least most. Because early in our careers, we are rewarded for technical competence. We learn interpretation, we build fantastic maps, we estimate volumes, we characterize reservoirs, we recommend wells. But as our career progresses, the questions we get asked begin to change. We're no longer asked questions like, what does the geologist say? Instead, they ask us, what do you recommend? What are the business implications? What decisions should we make? You see that transition from technical contributor to trusted advisor? That is one of the defining moments in the career of every geologist. So we'll spend some time reflecting on that evolution. We'll also examine uncertainty. Now, that's a topic that I'm particularly passionate about, because I believe uncertainty is often misunderstood. Many people associate uncertainty with weakness or incomplete work. Some people say it's a lack of confidence, but I see it differently. For me, uncertainty is a natural language of the subsurface, because the earth really presents us with certainty. It presents us with evidence, yeah. It gives us probability, it gives us ranges, it gives us alternative models. It even gives us competing interpretations. Our role isn't to eliminate uncertainty. Our role is to understand it, to constrain it, and perhaps even more importantly, to communicate it responsibly, because organizations rarely expect certainty, let's be honest, but they do expect honesty. They expect clarity. Finally, we'll conclude by discussing what I believe is the ultimate evolution of our profession, the journey from prospect generator to decision architect. Because early in our careers, success often means finding opportunities. But later in our careers, success increasingly means helping the organization make better decisions. Decisions about opportunities that distinguishes or sounds subtle. In reality, it changes everything. Because map alone, no matter how fantastic and beautifully colored, map alone do not create value. Interpretation alone do not create value. Even discoveries do not automatically create value. Value gets created when good decisions are consistently made. So although today's presentation begins with seismic data, it is ultimately about something bigger. It's about how geoscientists think, how we make decisions, how we communicate uncertainty, how we earn our trust, and ultimately, how we create value far beyond the maps that we produce. If by the end of today's session, we leave thinking differently about our role as geologists or geoscientists, then I think I would consider our time together well spent. So as you listen today, I would encourage you not to think only about the reservoirs you've worked on. Think about your own career, because you may discover that the journey from data to decision mirrors the journey many of us are making professionally. So like I promised, every slide as I move from one to the other would end with a takeaway. So the key takeaway for this slide is this. Today's presentation is not about seismic interpretation. It is about the thinking, the judgment, and the leadership that transform technical interpretation into trusted business decisions. So with this roadmap in mind, let's begin where every subsurface opportunity begins. We would have a simple, what should I call this now? Profound, important question. If we have more data, more technology, and more analytical ability or capability than we had in the past, why aren't our outcomes improving at the same pace? You know, that this question brings us to what I call the exploration paradox. Next slide, please. Now, what's the purpose of this slide? Don't mind that I'm putting all graphs and numbers. The purpose here is just to challenge one of the industry's long-held assumptions that more data ultimately or automatically leads to better outcomes. And hopefully we'll be able to reposition that discussion from data acquisition to decision quality. So we arrive at what I believe is one of the most interesting questions confronting our industry today. Like I'd mentioned just before we left the other slide. If we have more data, if we have more technology and more analytical capability than we had in the past, why aren't our outcomes improving at the same pace? For me, that is what I call the exploration paradox. Let me make myself clear a bit from the onset. Now, this is not an argument against technology. I love technology. That's far from it. Our industry has witnessed extraordinary technology advancement over the last, say, 3 decades. Consider a few examples that I'm going to share now. And I'm sure some members in the audience here began their career interpreting the conventional 2D seismic, where every line represented only a narrow window into the subsurface. Today, we routinely interpret high-density 3D seismic volumes that allow us to visualize geological features in remarkable details. We have processing algorithms that that have evolved so tremendously. We are able to image beneath complex overburden, and that has continuously improved significantly. I want to talk about computing power. Remember, this computing power used to occupy rooms. Today, we have them sitting very comfortably on our desk. AI continues to help us identify faults, classify facies, help us accelerate interpretation workflows. Cloud computing. That one allows even multidisciplinary teams across the continent to communicate real time. Reservoir models that used to take weeks to update. We do that with a click of 2-3 buttons, and we do that more effectively, more efficiently now. Now, there's no question that our technical abilities have truly improved dramatically. We should celebrate that. Yet, despite all these advances, certain realities still remain remarkably familiar. Some people still drill dry hole. Some still encounter unexpected reservoir compartmentalization. Some still discover that fluid contacts are different from what they anticipated. Some still revise volumetric estimates even after drilling appraisal wells. Some still update static models as new information becomes available. In other words, the earth continues to surprise us. And perhaps that shouldn't surprise us at all, because no matter how sophisticated our technology becomes, we are still attempting to understand an incredibly complex geological system from just limited observation. Every seismic survey is an indirect measurement. We know that. Every well samples only a tiny fraction of the reservoir. Every interpretation represents our best current understanding. Today, this understanding, not the absolute truth. Now, that distinction is critically important because sometimes we begin to confuse improved resolution with complete understanding. Better images do not necessarily eliminate ambiguity. What they do is to simply allow us to ask even the more sophisticated questions. So, where then does competitive advantage actually come from? If nearly every operator can purchase similar seismic, every operator can access similar software. They can apply comparable, processing and techniques. They can recruit the highly qualified professionals. Now, what distinguishes one organization from another becomes what? I would argue that the answer lies increasingly in how organizations think rather than what they know. Competitive advantage now comes from interpretation. It comes now from integration, from judgment, from disciplined decision thinking or making, not merely from accumulating more information. Let me explain this in another way. Imagine two multidisciplinary asset teams working on the same prospect. Both teams have access to identical seismic data. They have the same well logs. They have the same pressure information, the same regional geologic understanding or context, the same processing quality, the same software. Yet one team would identify an opportunity that ultimately creates significant value, and the other would just walk away, sadly. How can that happen? The answer is very straightforward. Because data rarely speaks for itself. People interpret data. People assign the significance. People weigh competing geological models. People decide which uncertainty matters the most. It's still people that decide whether evidence is compelling enough to justify any investment. And those decisions depend on experience, on reasoning, on collaboration, on judgment, not just technology. You see, over the years, have increasingly come to believe that our profession as geologists is quietly evolving, and it has continued to do so. Historically, one of our greatest competitive advantage was acquiring better data. Gone are the days. Today, acquiring data is still essential, don't get me wrong, but it's no longer sufficient. The differentiator has shifted. Today, the organizations that consistently outperform others are often those that ask better questions, not simply those that collect more answers. And what do they ask? They ask, what alternative geological models remain plausible? What assumptions are we making without realizing it? What uncertainty truly changes the business decision? What additional information would materially reduce the risk? When is further data acquisition worthwhile? And when does it merely delay a decision? Now, those are fundamental human questions. And no amount of computing power can answer them independently. There's another observation I'd like to share. Sometimes when projects fail, the first instinct is to blame the data. We needed better seismic. We needed another well. We needed additional processing. Occasionally, that's true, but not always. Sometimes the data sets were just already adequate. What was missing was the willingness to challenge our assumption, to integrate disciplines more effectively, to entertain competing, interpretation, to ask one more difficult question before giving recommendation for a new well. That's why I believe that the exploration paradox is not really about exploration. It's about thinking. Because once data reaches a certain level of quality, improvement in business outcome increasingly depends on what? Improvement in human judgment. So I'd like to leave us with this thought before we move on. Perhaps the most valuable question we should ask ourselves is no longer, how can we acquire more data? Perhaps the better question is, how can we think more effectively about the data we already have? Because that's where competitive advantage increasingly resides. If I may ask, how many of us have ever revisited an old prospect, maybe several years later, and suddenly we see something we completely missed the first time? That's fascinating, isn't it? You notice that the seismic hasn't changed. It didn't change. The geology stayed the same. So what changed? We did. Our experience changed. Our perspective changed. Our judgment evolved. And perhaps that's one of the strongest pieces of evidence that interpretation is fundamentally a human activity. Like I promised, every slide would have a keynote takeaway. So for this one, I'll say competitive advantage in modern geoscience no longer comes primarily from acquiring more data. It comes from asking better questions, integrating evidence more effectively. It comes from exercising sound professional judgment. So if interpretation, not data alone, is increasingly where value is created, let's now move from theory to practice. I'd like to show us a seismic example. And what that does is that it illustrates this all that I've talked about beautifully, because what you're about to see isn't remarkable because the seismic contained extraordinary information. I think it is remarkable because the opportunity emerged from seeing familiar information differently. And I believe that's where some of the greatest discoveries in our profession begin. I may be wrong, but that's what I feel. Next slide, please. Next slide. Could you help me with the next slide? Okay, so the purpose of this slide is to hopefully demonstrate that value is not created by seismic data itself. It gets created by the interpreter's abilities to synthesize multiple subtle observations into one coherent geologic story or one geologic model. Now let's move from philosophy to practice, because ideas only become meaningful when we can observe them in a real technical setting. What you're looking at here is a seismic session from an opportunity similar to what someone that I know had worked on in the past. At first glance, there is nothing particularly extraordinary about it. Most experienced interpreters in the house right now would probably identify many of the same geological features within a few seconds. For sure, we see a prominent structural closure. We see a bright amplitude response. There's even an area where amplitude gradually weakens adjacent to the fault. Now, none of these observations individually are unusual. In fact, every interpreter looking at this seismic session had assessed something like this that is similar. And the truth is that the software was the same. Seismic processing the same. Display the same. No one had privileged data. And that is precisely why I find this example very fascinating, because it illustrates an important principle. The competitive advantage did not come from seeing more, no. It came from understanding more. Let me explain. When we interpret seismic, we often begin by identifying individual observations. We see a reflector, we see a fault, we see an amplitude anomaly, we see a flat fault. We see an AVO response for the geophysicist in the house. We see a structural closure. Now, those observations are important, but observations by themselves rarely create value. The real challenge is actually determining whether those observations belong together. Do they tell one geologic story, or do they tell several unrelated ones? Is that distinction that changes everything. In this particular case, the bright amplitude anomaly immediately would attract attention, as it should. Bright anomalies or bright amplitudes naturally invite geologic curiosity, but bright amplitudes alone do not drill wells. We've all seen bright amplitudes caused by tuning effects, by metallurgical variations, by processing artifacts, by even thin bed interference, noise. They are indicators, but they are not conclusions. So the question therefore becomes, what geological process could reasonably explain this observation? And that's where we have a different question. Now let's consider the faults. Notice that as we move towards the faults, the amplitude begins to weaken. Again, taking into isolation that observation may not immediately appear significant. Let's note that. But it is known that amplitude attenuation, besides faults, can result from several different mechanisms. It may indicate leakage. It may represent changes in reservoir quality. It could even reflect changes in fluid saturation. Or it may simply be an imaging effect. By itself, the attenuation we see tells us very little. But interpretation is rarely about isolated observation. What interpretation is, at least to me, is about relationships. And that is where geological reasoning begins to take over. So rather than asking, what does the bright spot mean? Let's ask, what story explains all of these observations simultaneously? Can one geological model explain the structural closure, the amplitude response, the fault geometry, the attenuation, the migration pathway, even the trapping configuration, or even the regional petroleum system? Because if one coherent explanation accounts for all of them, our confidence will naturally increase. Notice what we're doing here. We are no longer interpreting seismic. We are evaluating competing geological hypotheses. That's a subtle but profound shift. one of the practices that I have found invaluable throughout my career is resisting the temptation to become emotionally attached to the first plausible interpretation. The first interpretation is often attractive because it seems to explain the data. But the best interpreters that I have worked with ask a different question. Typically, they'll say, what else could explain this? Could this be tuning? Victoria, could this be lithology? Could this be fault sale that's less effectively than we've assumed? Could charge have bypassed the structure? Could velocity uncertainty have altered our structural closure? Could there be an entirely different geological model that would explain this observation equally well, or perhaps even better? Now, that discipline is incredibly important because geology has a remarkable ability to humble confident interpreters. In this case, the opportunity emerged not because they discovered new seismic information. The opportunity emerged because those subtle observations that previously appeared unrelated were integrated into a single geologic framework. And that framework supported a very credible interpretation of what? Hydrocarbon charge, migration, trap integrity, retention, and ultimately a drillable opportunity. And guess what? Approximately God knows how many million barrels. Well, more, of course, were found around it. But remember, this is just a line that I'm sharing with. So think about that for a moment. This much was not hiding inside the seismic. The seismic contained evidence. Human interpretation transformed that evidence into business opportunity. You see, that distinction lies at the heart of today's presentation. Sometimes I get asked, what is the most valuable skill an interpreter can develop? Many would expect the answer to be maybe something that got to do with software, seismic attributes, machine learning. Now, those tools, no doubt, are important. But increasingly, I believe the answer is something a lot simpler. And what is that? The ability to connect observations that initially appeared unrelated. Because geology, as we know, rarely presents itself as a complete puzzle. More often, geology presents scattered pieces. It's now our responsibility to assemble them into the most plausible geological explanation. And that's where professional judgment creates value. I'd also like to emphasize something particularly important for our younger professionals that are here today. Here's what I'll say. Never, never, ever underestimate the value of asking questions. I've often found out that the most significant breakthroughs begin with very ordinary questions. What if our structure model is wrong? What assumptions are we making here? What evidence contradicts our preferred interpretation? What haven't we explained yet? You see those kind of questions? They have saved organizations numerous amounts of money, enormous. And occasionally, they have led to discoveries. So when I look at this seismic session today, I don't primarily see amplitudes. I don't see faults. I see something bigger. I see evidence that reminds me that interpretation is ultimately an act of disciplined reasoning. The seismic provides information, no doubt, but the geoscientist provides understanding. And it is the combination of those two that creates value. Let me ask the interpreters in the house. If I gave this exact seismic session to 10 experienced geoscientists, would I receive 10 identical interpretations? Probably not. And that shouldn't concern us. What it should do is to remind us that interpretation is not merely about observation. It's about reasoning. It is about reasoning. Okay, So our key takeaway here is this: seismic data rarely creates value on its own. Value emerges when disciplined geological reasoning transforms individual observations into a coherent and defensible subsurface model. So if this example teaches us anything at all, it's that interpretation is fundamentally a human activity. The seismic will provide us the evidence, but it is the interpreter, you and I, who would create meaning from that evidence, which naturally would lead to the next question that I have. What is it that enables one geoscientist to consistently recognize opportunities that others may overlook? I believe the answer lies in a set of professional capabilities that we seldom measure, but which quietly influences almost every important decision that we make. Those are the ones we should explore. Next slide, please. Okay, so what's the purpose of this slide? Hopefully, we will shift our thinking from what geoscientists know to how great geoscientists think. Now, that's the bridge from technical interpretation to professional judgment. This, I hope, would prep us for the trust gap. I think that's on the next slide. The seismic example we just examined teaches us something that I think is both simple and profound. Interpretation is not simply about technical competence. It's about the quality of thinking that sits behind the competence. As geoscientists, we spend significant proportion of our time in our career measuring the reservoir. We measure lithology, we measure porosity, permeability, net to gross, water saturation, pressure, fluid contacts, reservoir thickness. We quantify uncertainty. We calculate recoverable reserves of volumes. We generate fantastic, colorful maps. We even make it almost precise. And rightly so. Now, these measurements form technical foundation of our profession. But I would like to suggest something this afternoon. Some of the capabilities that most influence our decisions never appear on a log. Do you know that? They never appear on seismic section. They never appear in petrol. They cannot be extracted from a core plug, yet they often determine whether an opportunity succeeds or fails. Let me explain. The first capability is pattern recognition. Now, pattern recognition isn't simply about identifying a channel or recognizing a fault trend. No, it's the ability to recognize significance even before completing certainty. Think about how we walk every day. Rarely does the subsurface present us with perfect evidence. Instead, what does it give us? Fragments. It gives one subtle amplitude anomaly, a pressure trend, a depositional pattern, maybe an unexpected well, maybe the result of a well that is you never expected, an analog from another basin. Individually, each of these observations may seem unremarkable, but together they begin to reveal the geologic story. The best interpreters that I have worked with possessed extraordinary ability to connect those fragments long before the full picture became obvious. And interestingly, that ability is developed. How does it come? It comes from experience, from curiosity, from reflection, from learning from both successes and disappointment. The second capability is integrative thinking. One of the greatest mistakes we make, or we can make, is treating our discipline as independent silos. Geology says one thing, geophysics says another, reservoir engineering says something else, drilling raises additional concern. Then comes commercial. Commercial team, they will introduce their own economic realities. Now, each discipline sees only a part of the system. The geologist who creates exceptional value is the one that often integrates all of these perspectives into one coherent narrative. Because the earth does not recognize departmental boundaries. I hope we know that. Nature doesn't separate geology from engineering. The reservoir functions as one integrated system. Our thinking should be the same. I have found that some of the most valuable conversations that I've had weren't with another geologist. I have to be honest with you. They were with drilling engineers, production engineers, petrophysicists, economists, because every discipline helps to expose assumptions we may not even realize we're making. The next capability is one that I believe defines our profession: judgment under uncertainty. Unlike many professionals, or many professions rather, we are rarely asked to make decisions with complete information. Unlike many professions, we recommend wells before drilling them. We estimate reserves before production begins. Somebody's trying to call me, so I'll just ignore it. We characterize reservoirs that are kilometers underneath our feet. Everything we do involves uncertainty. The question is not whether uncertainty exists, because it does. It always does. It exists. The question is, can we make high-quality decisions despite it? Now, that is professional judgment. And I want to emphasize something here. Judgment is not intuition. Judgment is disciplined reasoning, developed over years of learning, over years of observation, over years of reflection, and continuing testing of our assumptions. Good judgment allows us to know when the available evidence is sufficient to act, and equally important, when additional information would genuinely improve the decision. The fourth capability is one that is often underestimated: trust and influence. Many of us enter this profession believing that technical excellence would naturally speak for itself. Over time, most of us discover something different. Excellent technical work does not automatically influence organizational decisions. People do, you and I. Decision makers must trust not only our conclusions, they must trust our reasoning, they must trust our transparency, our consistency, our integrity. Trust is accumulated long before the critical decisions are made. It gets built meeting after meeting, project after project, conversation after conversation. When trust exists, uncertainty becomes easier to discuss. But when trust is absent, even excellent interpretations may struggle to gain support. I think we'll explore that idea more deeply. I think it's on the next slide. Now, the final capability I'd like to mention here is learning agility. If there's one constant in our profession, it is change. Think about how much has changed during our careers. New acquisition technologies, new processing workflows, machine learning, cloud computing, digital software platforms, automation, AI. This continues to evolve. But the geology does not, which means that our greatest competitive advantage increasingly becomes our willingness to keep learning. I've always admired professionals who remain intellectually curious regardless of seniority. I mean, the ones who still ask questions, still attend technical sessions, still challenge their own interpretations, the type that would welcome alternative interpretations of viewpoints. You see those professionals, they are the ones that continue to grow long after others have stopped learning. When I look back over my own career, I honestly don't believe that the individuals who had the greatest impact were always the smartest people in the room. No, nor were they necessarily the most technically gifted. Rather, they consistently demonstrated these quieter capabilities. What are they? They saw patterns others overlooked. They integrated disciplines naturally. They remained calm under uncertainty. They built trust. And they never stopped learning. You see that combination, I have come to see them to prove powerfully well. So perhaps we should occasionally ask ourselves a different question. How can I become a better interpreter? No, don't ask yourself that. Rather, ask yourself, how can I become a better thinker? Because ultimately, we measure the reservoir. But those hidden capabilities determine the quality of the decisions we make about it. Think for a moment about the best geoscientists you've ever worked with. What made that person exceptional? Was it software? Or was it the way they taught? I suspect many of us already know, and we're already seeing the person right in front of us. They always have the same qualities. Take away. Technical competence gets us into the room. Pattern recognition, integrative thinking, judgment, trust, continuous learning determine the value we create once we are in there, once we are in that room. So far, we've established that great geoscience depends far more than technical knowledge. We've seen that interpretation requires judgment. We've also seen that judgment depends on trust. But here's something many of us have experienced firsthand. What happens when excellent technical work still fails to become an organizational decision? At that point, the challenge is no longer geological. It becomes deeply human. And that brings us to what I believe is one of the most overlooked barriers to value creation in our profession. And that is trust gap. Let's go to the next slide. Next slide, please. Next slide. I hope you all can hear me. Okay, good. Okay. No,
we
go back.
we can.
So, yeah, so stop here. Okay. So what is the purpose of this slide? Is to help demonstrate that technical excellence alone is insufficient. Yeah, it looks all scattered and all. This slide introduces the organizational dimension of geoscience, how trust, influence, communication, credibility determine whether technically sound interpretations ultimately become business decisions. I want you to see it as the emotional and the intellectual pivot of this entire presentation. Let me begin with what I suspect is a familiar experience for many of us online right now. Have you ever worked on a project where you genuinely believed the technical work was excellent, the interpretation was robust enough, the multidisciplinary team reviewed it and it was thorough? Even the risk you believe had been carefully evaluated, yet the recommendation never moved forward. Perhaps the project was deferred. Perhaps management selected another opportunity. Perhaps additional data got requested. Or even perhaps the recommendation simply lost momentum somewhere within the organization. Now, if you've experienced that, you're certainly not alone. Because one of the most frustrating realities in our profession is this: a technically sound interpretation does not automatically become a business decision. Now, that's a very difficult lesson to accept early in your career, or in my career, anybody's career, because most of us were trained to believe that if our technical work was rigorous enough, objective enough, and scientifically defensible enough, the decision should naturally follow. Unfortunately, organizations don't make decisions based solely on technical correctness. They make decisions within a broader context. For example, commercial priorities, capital allocation, portfolio balance, strategic timing, risk appetite, operational constraint, stakeholder confidence, even competing investment opportunities. All of these factors enter the conversation, which means that by the time a recommendation reaches the decision table, it is no longer purely a geological discussion. It has become a business discussion, and that's an important distinction. Think about what happens during an opportunity review. As geoscientists, we often focus on questions such as, is the structure closure valid? Have we adequately evaluated the trap? Does the charge model make geologic sense? How confident are we in reservoir distribution? Now, these are entirely appropriate questions, don't get me wrong. But decision makers, executives around that table are often asking different questions. Questions like, if we commit several hundreds of millions of dollars to this project, what is the downside? How confident are we? What assumptions are driving these recommendations? What happens if those assumptions prove incorrect? Why should prospects receive funding ahead of other opportunities competing for capital? Notice something interesting here. They are not questioning geology. They are not evaluating confidence. Nope. And confidence gets built through trust. Now, this brings me to what I call the trust gap. The interpreter sees evidence, the organization sees risk. The interpreter sees geological probability, the organization sees capital exposure. The interpreter sees opportunity, the organization sees consequences. Neither perspective here is wrong. They are simply looking at the same project through different lenses. And our responsibilities as geoscientists is not merely to generate technically correct interpretations. Our responsibility is to help bridge those perspectives, to translate geological understanding into business confidence. One of the most valuable lessons that I've learned throughout my career is that influence begins long before the presentation itself. Many people think that influence is something that happens inside the meeting room. I don't believe that that's true at all. Influence is built long before anyone opens a PowerPoint presentation. It's built through consistency, through credibility, through intellectual honesty, through acknowledging uncertainty rather than hiding it, through demonstrating that when new evidence emerges, we are willing to revise our interpretation. Ironically, people often trust professionals more, not less, when they openly discuss uncertainty, because trust builds confidence. False certainty destroys it. I would also like to speak briefly to our young professionals at this point. Never confuse confidence with certainty. Never. Some of the most respected technical leaders that I've worked with were remarkably comfortable saying, Victoria, based on the evidence available today, this is the interpretation I recommend. Notice the wording. Not this is the unquestionably correct one. No, this is the interpretation best supported by the current evidence. That's a fundamentally different posture. It reflects humility, scientific discipline, professional maturity, and perhaps most importantly, it leaves room for learning, because geology has a wonderful habit of teaching us something new every time we drill another well. Now, let me introduce another thought to this. Sometimes projects fail because the interpretation was wrong. That happens. We're human. But I believe many more opportunities fail for a different reason. They fail because excellent technical work was never communicated in a way that decision makers could truly trust. The science may have been excellent, but the story wasn't clear. The uncertainty wasn't framed. The business implications were not articulated. The audience left understanding to geology, but not the decision. And that's a missed opportunity because our role is not simply to explain the subsurface. Our role is to enable better decisions about the subsurface. When I think about the geoscientists that have influenced my own career, one characteristic consistently stands out. They didn't simply answer questions, they anticipated them. Before management would ask, what could go wrong? They had already discussed it. Before someone would challenge an assumption, they had already acknowledged it. Before uncertainty becomes uncomfortable, they have already framed it constructively. You see that level of preparation, it inspires confidence. And like they say, confidence inspires action. So perhaps the next time we prepare a technical presentation, we should ask ourselves one additional question. Not only is my interpretation technically robust, we should ask, have I communicated it in a way that enables confident decision-making? Because technical excellence may earn us credibility, but trusted communication is what ultimately transforms credibility into organizational action. And that, I believe, is where some, if not most, of the greatest value in our profession is created. If I may, can I ask by a show of hands, how many of us have ever left a technical review thinking, the science was solid, so why didn't the project move forward? I'm sure we have. Perhaps the issue wasn't the geology. Perhaps the issue was the gap between understanding the interpretation and trusting the decision. Perhaps. Okay, the takeaway here is this. Technical excellence earns attention, but trust, communication, credibility transforms technical excellence into organizational decisions. So we've now seen that uncertainty doesn't merely exist in the subsurface. It also exists in the decisions that organizations make about the subsurface. What naturally raises another important question is, how should we, as geoscientists, think about uncertainty? Should we view it as a weakness to eliminate, or as something far more fundamental? I would argue that uncertainty is not the enemy of good interpretation. In fact, it is the natural language of the earth itself. And that's where I'd like us to go next. Next slide, please. Okay, as always, the purpose of this slide is to hopefully redefine uncertainty from something to be feared into something to be understood, to be managed, and to be communicated. The way I've structured this slide makes it position uncertainty as one of the defining competencies of great geoscientists. I'd like to begin with a statement that may sound a little unusual. Uncertainty is not a flaw in subsurface interpretation. It is a natural condition of subsurface interpretation. Let me say that again. Uncertainty is not evidence of poor interpretation. More often than not, it is the evidence of honest interpretation. As geoscientists, we work in one of the few professions where some of the most important decisions are made long before complete information becomes available. Think about what we actually do as geoscientists. We estimate hydrocarbon volumes before producing the first barrel. We recommend wells before drilling them. We characterize reservoirs that are buried thousands of meters and feet beneath the Earth's surface. We forecast production years before facilities are commissioned. Everything we recommend is based on evidence, but never on complete evidence. That is the reality of our profession. And that's perfectly acceptable because Our objective has never been to eliminate uncertainty. Rather, our objective is to understand it well enough to make sound decisions despite it. One of the greatest misconceptions about uncertainty is that it reflects weakness. I've heard people say that, but I disagree completely. In fact, I would argue that pretending uncertainty does not exist is far more dangerous than acknowledging it openly. Whenever someone presents a single structural map, a single hydrocarbon contact, a single reserve estimate, or a single production forecast, I often ask myself, what uncertainty lies behind this number? Because every map contains assumption. Every depth conversion that we do contains assumption. Our velocity model, they contain assumptions. Our Fishy models, they contain assumptions. You see all those petrophysical interpretation we get from them, they contain assumptions. Every volumetric estimate contains assumptions. Sometimes those assumptions are well constrained, but sometimes they are not, but they are always present. So the question is whether we have recognized them, have we tested them, and have we communicated them honestly? This is why I believe P10, P50, P90 represent far more than probabilistic outputs. They are not simply numbers generated by software. They are a language through which geoscientists communicate confidence. They communicate risk, opportunity, uncertainty. Think about what those three scenarios really represent. I know some companies have it reversed, but I'm going to speak from the way we see it in Chevron. The P10 case reflects a more conservative but equally plausible interpretation. P90, on the other hand, represents an optimistic but technically defensible outcome. Then, of course, P50 sits somewhere between them. But here's something I think is often overlooked. Software can calculate statistical distribution. Software, yeah. They can generate probabilistic ranges, but software cannot decide which geological assumption deserves greater confidence. That decision still belongs to us as geologists. The choice of a meaningful P50 is not merely a mathematical exercise. It's an exercise in professional judgment. It requires integrating seismic interpretation, well control, regional geology, analog well information, petrophysical understanding, structural uncertainty, depositional concepts, and sometimes even years of accumulated experience. In other words, the number may appear numerical, but the reasoning behind it is profoundly geological. I'd like to illustrate this with a practical example. Imagine that you are evaluating a structural closure. Your seismic interpretation suggests approximately, say, 40 feet of closure. However, your depth conversion carries a structural uncertainty of plus or minus 25 feet. Now ask yourself, has uncertainty disappeared? Of course not. In fact, it has become one of the most important pieces of information in the entire evaluation because that uncertainty may determine whether the trap remains closed, whether spill occurs, whether the hydrocarbon column changes significantly, and ultimately, whether the economics remain attractive. Notice something important here. The uncertainty itself isn't the problem. The problem will be pretending that it doesn't exist. This is also why I encourage the younger professionals never to become uncomfortable discussing uncertainty. Some people worry that admitting uncertainty would reduce confidence. In my experience, the opposite is usually true. Decision makers rarely lose confidence because uncertainty exists. Rather, they lose confidence when uncertainty appears to have been ignored, or when it gets hidden, or when it gets discovered too late. When uncertainty is communicated clearly, people know what they are deciding on. When uncertainty is concealed, confidence begins to erode. Transparency, they say, builds trust, and trust supports better decisions. There's another reason uncertainty deserves respect. It keeps us intellectually humble. Have you noticed? No matter how experienced we become, the next well will still surprise us. The next appraisal program can redefine the reservoir model. That next pressure measurement can change our understanding of compartmentalization. The next call may completely reshape our depositional interpretation. Geology constantly reminds us that certainty is temporal, learning is continuous, and perhaps that is even one of the reasons our profession remains endlessly fascinating, at least to me. I would also like to make an important distinction here. There's a difference between uncertainty and ignorance. You know that, right? Ignorance is not knowing. Uncertainty is recognizing multiple plausible outcomes based on your available evidence. Good geoscience reduces ignorance. It does not eliminate uncertainty. That distinction is critical because sometimes organizations spend enormous resources trying to eliminate uncertainty entirely. But not all uncertainty deserves elimination. Some uncertainties simply are a part of the cost of doing business. Our responsibility is to determine which uncertainty materially would influence the decision and which one would not. Now, that is what I call decision quality. That is what I call value creation. As I have reflected throughout my own career, I've come to appreciate something rather profound. You see, the formation has never promised certainty. It has only offered evidence, fragments. It offers to us signals. It gives us patterns. It gives us possibilities. Now, our task is to listen carefully, to interpret responsibly, and then communicate honestly, because that's what geoscientists do. If I were to ask everyone now to think about the last well that genuinely surprised you, what would you say? Did the surprise occur because the geology was careless? Or because the earth revealed something you couldn't have fully, known before that time, beforehand? Now, that's why uncertainty deserves our respect, not our fear. Not our fear. What's our key takeaway from this slide? Great geoscientists do not eliminate uncertainty. They understand it. They bound it. They communicate it honestly. And they enable better decisions because of it. The formation is always speaking. Uncertainty is simply the language in which it speaks. So over the past few minutes, we've explored interpretation, we've explored judgment, trust, now uncertainty. Each one represents a capability that extends far beyond technical software, far beyond seismic workflows. Now, when these capabilities begin to mature together, something remarkable happens. Our professional identity begins to change. We stop seeing ourselves simply as interpreters of the subsurface. We begin becoming the architects of better decisions. That's what I believe is the natural evolution of every geologist or geoscience career. Now, let's conclude by looking at what that evolution really means. Next slide, please. Throughout today's discussion, we've explored the journey from data to interpretation, to judgment, to trust, and finally to uncertainty. But perhaps the most important journey isn't technical at all. Perhaps it's our own professional journey, because every geoscientist, whether consciously or not, follows a similar pattern throughout their career. Early in our careers, our focus is understandably technical. We learn structural interpretation, we identify faults, we map horizons, we estimate reserves, we generate prospects, we build static models, we understand petroleum system, we characterize reservoirs. Now, these are foundational for our own profession, and they are absolutely essential. Without strong technical competence, nothing else follows. So let me just be clear here. I'm not in any way suggesting that technical excellence becomes less important. Far from it. It's actually quite the opposite. In fact, it remains the foundation upon which everything else is built. But foundations are not the finished structure. As our careers evolve, the questions people ask us begin to change. Have you noticed? Early in our careers, our supervisors might ask, hey, please, Victoria, can you map this horizon? Can you evaluate this prospect for me? Can you estimate the story? Can you prepare the uncertainty analysis? Now, those are typical technical questions. But as we become more experienced, the questions become very different. They ask you, should we drill? Should we delay? What additional information would reduce this decision risk? Victoria, how confident are you in this recommendation? Now, Victoria, if this was your investment, what would you do? Notice something remarkable here. At that point, people are no longer asking about the map. They're not asking about your judgment. And that represents one of the most significant transitions in geoscience career. I'd like to describe that transition as moving from being a prospect generator to becoming a decision architect. A prospect generator creates or finds opportunities, right? A decision architect creates confidence. A prospect generator identifies where hydrocarbons exist. But guess what? A decision architect helps the organization to determine whether pursuing those hydrocarbons truly would create value. A prospect generator will interpret the earth, but a decision architect would influence the future of the business. Do you see the point? Those are very different responsibilities. Think about the people whose opinion carry the greatest weight within any organization or institution. Are they always the people who produce the most maps? Usually not. Are they always the individuals with the highest technical IQ? Not necessarily. More often than not, they are trusted because of something deeper. They consistently demonstrate sound judgment. They remain objective. They communicate clearly. They anticipate consequences. They understand both the technical and the commercial realities. They know how to simplify complexity without oversimplifying it. And most importantly, when they speak, people listen. Not because of their job title, no, but because they've earned trust over many years. Now, this is where I'd like to spend a few moments. I want to speak again to the younger professionals. If you are early in your career, I know David John is online. If you are early in your career, invest deeply in becoming technically excellent. Learn the science, learn the software, learn the workflows, study structural geology, sedimentology, petrophysics, reservoir engineering. Seek opportunities to work across disciplines. Build a strong technical foundation, but don't stop there. Develop your ability to communicate. Learn to explain complex ideas simply. Ask very thoughtful questions. Listen carefully. Seek feedback. Have a growth mindset. One of my MD once said, Victoria, never you become, in the month of December, your January self. Seek feedback. Read widely beyond geology. Understand economics, yes. Understand leadership. Understand decision-making, because one day, your career will depend less on how well you can interpret seismic and more on how well others trust your judgment. That transition happens gradually, often without us even noticing it, until one day people just stop asking us for maps and they start asking us for advice. I have come to believe that the future of our profession is changing in another important way. Artificial AI. AI will continue to improve. Automation will continue to expand. Routine interpretation tasks will become increasingly efficient. That's inevitable. But I do not believe AI will replace the geoscientists. I believe it will elevate the importance of uniquely human capabilities. For example, your ability, your curious ability, your ethics, your context, your leadership, your judgment, your influence. Those qualities cannot simply be automated because every important business decision ultimately involves consequences, and consequences require accountability. The responsibility for those decisions would always remain human. So when I look back over my own career, I've realized something. The moments that I'm proudest of aren't necessarily the maps that I produced or the seismic lines that I interpreted, or even the prospects that matured successfully. No. What I value most are the occasions where good technical work helped the people make better decisions, where uncertainty was communicated honestly, where multidisciplinary teams reached an alignment because I said something, where evidence became understanding and understanding became action. So to me, that is where our profession creates its greatest value. I may be wrong, but that's how I see it. So perhaps, just perhaps, the measure of a successful geoscientist is not simply the number of prospects generated, but the quality of the decisions influenced, because ultimately, our legacy will not be defined only by the reservoirs we discovered. It would also be defined by the decisions we helped others make. And I believe that's a legacy worth pursuing. Imagine someone describing your career 20 years from now. What do you hope they would say? That you produce excellent maps? Or that your judgment consistently helped organization or the institution make better decisions? For me, I know which legacy I would choose. I don't know if you'd want any keynotes, but I'll drop one anyway. I'll drop a key takeaway. The highest calling of a geoscientist is not merely to discover opportunities. That's not our calling. It is the ability, is to be able to make better, or to enable better decisions. Decisions that create enduring value for the organization or the institution, anyone. Ladies and gentlemen, we began today's conversation by asking what the data cannot tell us. Now, along the way, we discovered that data alone cannot provide judgment. It cannot build trust. It cannot communicate uncertainty. It cannot make decisions. You see those responsibilities, they remain ours. So I'd like to leave us with a final note. Please, next slide, please. I'd like to return to the question that brought us together.
Sorry, ma. Sorry.
Yes?
This is the last slide. I don't know if
Yes,
you have
leave it there.
Okay. Okay.
What can the data not tell us? Throughout this presentation, we've discovered that data, regardless of its quality or quantity, has limitations. At least we agree on that one. Data can reveal structure. It can image faults. It can estimate reservoir properties. It can identify, amplitude anomalies. It can improve our understanding of the subsurface. Artificial intelligence can process that data faster than before, right? Software can model increasingly complex geological systems. Computers can generate thousands of possible realizations in a matter of minutes. Now, these are remarkable achievements, and they will continue to transform our profession. But despite all of this, there are still questions that data alone can never answer. It cannot tell us which competing geological model deserves better confidence. It cannot tell us whether an opportunity should move forward today or wait for another well. It cannot determine how much uncertainty an organization is prepared to accept. It cannot build trust around a recommendation. Data cannot persuade a multidisciplinary team. You know that. It cannot inspire confidence in an investment committee. And perhaps, even more importantly, It cannot accept responsibility for the decisions that follow, because every significant decision in our industry still carries something that technology cannot replace, which is what? Human judgment. When I pick at it, if I look at the attendees today, I do not simply see geologists or geophysicists or petrophysicists or reservoir engineers. I see professionals entrusted with helping organizations or institutions make some of the most consequential decisions. Decisions involving millions or even billions of dollars. Decisions that influence national energy security. Decisions that affect shareholder value. Decisions that shape careers. And ultimately, decisions that determine whether opportunities become producing assets or they remain unrealized possibilities. Now, whether you like it or not, that is an extraordinary responsibility. And it should remind us that our profession is not just about rocks, but about business decision-making. If there's one message I hope you take away from today's discussion, is that we continue to develop our technical expertise. We master software, we understand the geology, we challenge our interpretations, we embrace new technology, we leave AI where it creates, or we leverage them where it creates value. But let's not forget that our greatest contribution will not come from technology alone. It will come from the quality of our thinking, our curiosity, our integrity, our humility, our willingness to ask difficult and clarifying questions, if you may. Our courage to communicate uncertainty honestly. Our ability to help others make better decisions, even when certainty remains out of reach. And you know why? Because those qualities would always distinguish exceptional geoscientists. As I reflect on our profession, I've come to believe something quite simple. The earth has always been speaking, such that every seismic reflection, every well, every core, every pressure point, every production profile forms a part of an ongoing conversation with the subsurface. Our responsibility is not merely to collect that information. No, our responsibility is to listen carefully enough, to understand wisely enough, and to communicate clearly enough that good decisions become possible. So let me leave you all with this final thought. The future of our profession will not belong to those who simply have access to the most data. It will belong to those who consistently transform data into insights, insight into judgment, judgment into trust, and trust. Your guess is as good as mine. Trust into decisions that create enduring value. Because in the end, the greatest discoveries we make are not only beneath the earth's surface. They are in the way we learn to think, to lead, and to decide. Thank you very much for your kind attention. But just before I leave, it's been a privilege truly sharing this. I have a closing quote. The formation is always speaking. I've said this 1,000 times. Our responsibility is to listen with science, is to interpret it with wisdom, and communicate it with integrity. And most importantly, decide with courage, because that is what the data cannot tell us. Thank you very much. It's been a privilege sharing these thoughts of mine with everybody today. Thank you.
All right, thanks a lot, Victoria. I think it's been a very pleasant presentation talking around what the data cannot tell you. And I guess everyone here present have actually learned a lot from the impact of making decisions with the available data, and for you to also realize that even when the data is available, if you don't make right decisions, right judgments on those data, we wouldn't be able to get so much value from it. So I'll just summarize briefly what Victoria has presented. First, she has shown that there's a lot of data for us to use on the subsurface to do our, all the geoscience work that we need to do. We have a lot of data. However, the challenge is still the responsibility of the interpreter to transform the data into trusted decision and into trusted results. Then the other bit also she talked about was that even when you've done all the fantastic seismic interpretation, well logs, and the rest of them, we still have to realize that there are limits to how much the data could actually show you, such that it is your experience, the intelligence, and how you're able to manage appropriate geoscience concepts that will tell you if indeed the results of what you've interpreted will give good positive results, and also if what you've also brought out from your interpretation would lead to a positive response from the management to progress to, to carry out, to execute or drill such an opportunity. Where she also showed an example of a seismic data where you have along the fault, you have a dimming of amplitude along the fault, showing possible leakage pathway. So for an interpreter, the data has shown you that, but it's for you to realize that with what you're seeing, it's possible that fault, that dimming of amplitude along that fault can give you an indication that there's likelihood that that fault is not sealing. And even in some cases where the fault might be initially sealing, we've seen cases of fault reactivation, such that if, for instance, I give you're in the deep offshore environment and initially, you've tried producing from a reservoir and you have these minor faults that are, gradually compartmentalizing your reservoir into subset. At the end of the day, by the time you're going to run your 4D seismic, that's your repeatability, you now realize that you're now beginning to see some dimming along those minor faults. What that is telling you is that in the initial time, those faults were actually, sealing, but over time, they have been reactivated due to the production activities and pressure depletion. So it just shows that indeed there are lots that, that the data itself is showing to you, but if you do not interpret it, you're definitely going to get much value from it. Then the final one also, she talked around uncertainty, that in whatever we do, we should always factor in the uncertainty range. We realize that you have the P50, P10, P90. And what does uncertainty tell you is it's either this nor that. So it's for you to now say within this band, I expect to get, I give you an instance, if you're expecting to, get a structure or get an hydrocarbon volume of about 20 million barrels, and you're not so sure about that volume because you're seeing in a wide exploration scale, you can decide, okay, I'm going to put a band, a low case of 5 million, the high case of 50, or a mid case of 20. But in that case, you also need to look at what are the insights that is actually guiding these choices of uncertainty. Then she talked around finally on the 5 competences or the 5 competences required that the data cannot measure. She talked around pattern recognition, integrative thinking, judgment under uncertainty, influence and trust, and the learning agility. Then I think the last she talked around was the decision output. Whatever we do in the geoscience space also ties down to decision. So if at the end of the day, you've brought out all the fantastic stuff and you're not able to provide a good insight, you're not able to provide good judgment from your own interpretation, from your own evaluation, and you're not able to influence a decision, and people don't also trust your results, then it becomes a bit of a difficult situation for people to actually buy into whatever story. And I think this last point is very, very key. We've seen situations where people have done fantastic work, but because of the approach of which they presented that job, at the end of the day, people decide, well, I don't think we are confident enough to actually go into execute this opportunity. And also the other bit is also in trust. If people believe that you do not take extra time to pay attention to all of the data that you have and what are the possible uncertainties that could come out from the data, the possible limitations, then there are also likelihood to say, oh, well, this guy doesn't factor in risk. If you don't factor in risk in everything you do, then it's likelihood that there might be some major resultant errors coming from it. So this is in summary of what Victoria has presented to us. But I also like to share some experience of where I feel limitations, where you factor in limitations in data. And over time, at least I've been involved in drilling over 20 development wells. And I could see in some cases, in the course of drilling this well, some go very smoothly, sweet, slam dunk and all, while some others come with potential challenges. And some, there are even challenges that was never preempted. But on the course of, during these opportunities, you find out those challenges. Then that begins to look at the data you actually used in carrying out this interpretation. What did the data actually tell you? One simple analogy I'll give is, one simple example is in faults. So for instance, imagine if your fault is trending in a northeast direction and your interpretation or your interest is actually to identify an opportunity behind the fault. Even if your seismic is telling you that that fault is very clear at that point, it is conceptually required that naturally, if you want to penetrate such a fault, you need to go perpendicular, you need to penetrate that fault perpendicular to the direction of the fault plane. If you do not do that, you realize that over time, if that fault by any chance moves or position of that fault changes due to seismic not giving the right image, you might miss the opportunity. So we've seen cases like that where you expect that you're going to see fault at so depth, and by the time you get to that depth, you're not seeing the fault. And what you have to do at that time is to stop the operations and look for how you can intervene. Now, you don't stop an operation. Also, by the time you got into the TD of the world, you stop an operation in between, and that's what makes you a sound geoscientist, because you've made a prediction based on your seismic, but things are beginning to change. So what do you do at that point? You're expecting to see older sediments, but you've been seeing younger sediments all the while. It gives you an indication. At this point, I might need to call the rig, work with the deviation, the survey guys, the DD guys, to see how I can actually replan my trajectory to penetrate my fault in a perpendicular direction. And that way, I'm able to, get my opportunity. That's one example. The second example is also we've heard about migration, velocity pull-ups. You have this in some fields and in the Delta as well, where you have, you see a very interesting structure. We've seen cases where you plan a well and your well is actually, from your structural interpretation, it's showing that your well is on the flank of the structure or is down the, crest, down the flank of the structure. Then your interest as a geoscientist is to go, from your seismic, you see a structure, I want to go to the crest of that structure to place a well. And by the time you start drilling, you realize that, you're expecting your actual to be tying on prognosis, but your actual is going way deeper than your prognosis. That means, let me say 1,000 feet from where your opportunity is, your structure is supposed to be high, but all of a sudden, the structure begins to deep and deep and deep and deep, and you realize that you're almost getting to 500 feet close to your opportunity. In that case, the data itself is not giving you a true representation of what you expected. You now have to use your geological conceptual idea to know that if indeed the structure here is deepening down, that means whatever I'm seeing on this structure does not reflect it. What I have to do at that point is to adjust my trajectory to go closer to the location where I have an existing penetration. So in that way, what is this actually showing you? That place where you're thinking those wells were on the flank, that was actually the crestal part of that structure. Just that the seismic image itself, based on maybe reprocessing artifacts or the migration process, must have placed the structure, wrongly. And in that way, you're able to, manage it because you're following up the drilling operations as you drill. Then the third scenario, which I also want to show based on my, my drilling experience, is working on the edge of seismic. I've seen a lot of professionals done fantastic work. And once they come towards the edge of seismic and you see one structure going up to the edge of seismic, those structures in many cases are not real. Whatever structure you see at the edge of seismic, they are as a result of what you call migration smearing or acquisition edge effects. And what does acquisition edge effect means? Means at the end of your seismic, your fold is not able to give a true representation of what the structure is towards that edge. And I've seen cases where you plan a well and you see that structure dipping towards the end of the towards the end of the seismic, and you go in there to place that well there, only for you to realize that that structure has actually pulled down. So what that tells us is that the data itself needs to be carefully managed, because if you're not able to use your geological interpretation and also have a vast knowledge of the uncertainties and the challenges that you're going to experience using this data, then it becomes a lot difficult for you to begin to make successful operations. So we've seen people come out and say, oh, this structure is very sweet, fantastic. We'll go in there and you get the opportunity, and you go in there, you begin to see surprises. That structural high you're seeing there on your seismic, that is looking very fantastic. By the time you get there, it is flat. The fault you're seeing there, thinking it is there, by the time you get there, the position has changed. So a lot of things can change. And as a geoscientist, what Victoria is trying to make us understand today is that we need to ensure that we factor in all the geological concepts It's just like in normal way in the Niger Delta, you see most of the major faults are listric. If by chance you go ahead and see a fault on a seismic and it becomes very straight, a major fault, it's already giving you an indication, depending on where you are on the data, that that fault might not be a true representation of what the geometry is on that seismic. So, you know, a lot of things coming by experience, coming by geological concepts, and also the amount of time people pay in terms of paying attention to the project itself. Because I think most of the challenge I see so far is people not paying attention. If you pay extra attention, it's not the big work, the fantastic project itself. It's paying attention to what the data is saying and what the data is not saying. So if I have a data and it's not telling me this, then I have to use my geological understanding and say, if this data is not telling me this is the possible likelihood of what is likely going to happen by the time I get to this level. So in that way, one is able to capture in all the uncertainties, prepare for the unknown, and also challenge the status quo. So when someone comes in and say, oh, we need to go here, you can also challenge it, but you have to challenge now using all the available data you have. I mean, using all the available geological and scientific knowledge and concepts that are available to you to challenge that and make it a better decision. And we've also seen cases where, where this geoscientific knowledge and scientific approaches are very important more than the data. A simple analogy is what we have in the Guyana discovery. We are all here aware of what happened in Guyana a few years ago, where we had a lot of the major companies trying to, explore for opportunities. And, over 50 dry wells were drilled in the Guyana until, the big geological concept, the Geoscientist stratigraphic and the depositional concept that was brought up by Hess and Edson Moby came to bear, and they drilled that and made a major discovery of over 1 billion barrels of oil. And that opened up the door for Guyana and the rest of. So what I'm just saying in essence is sometimes it's not just about the data, it's even understanding the concept, the depositional environment, the concept that is leading to where that opportunity is. You can have all the fantastic data. If the concept is not properly captured, the little concept, not even the big, because you can do all the fantastic attributes and all those things, and it don't still give you what you want. But when you understand the concept, if it even gets to the stage of execution, you can begin to plan what are all the contingencies that you need to factor in so that you can be able to get value from what you do in the subsurface. So I think this summary of these few points of mine, I've been able to summarize what Victoria has said and also show some examples of how data could actually give you some form of limitations and how you need to make some geological, assumptions based on the amount of experience you have and the concepts you actually factor into working your project. So we'll now go to questions. So I'm just going to quickly check on the chat if there are any questions, so we could actually bring that up to Victoria's attention. Okay, so I have a question from Umar Fulibea, Chinedu Steven. He said, you emphasized that the future competitive advantage in geoscience lies in human judgment rather than just data. Yet, every geological interpretation is influenced by assumptions that can introduce cognitive bias. As AI becomes increasingly capable of seismic interpretation, which aspects of geological reasoning do you believe will remain uniquely human over the next 10 to 15 years? And how can young geoscientists develop those skills while minimizing cognitive bias? Victoria, did you get that clear?
Let me be sure that I got that right. Thank you. I didn't catch the name, but thank you who sent that. So if I got you right, sorry, I had to turn off my camera, my battery, because I'm communicating via my phone. Network is not too friendly here. So your question was, with AI, if I got that right, you said with AI advancing seismic interpretation, with geological reasoning skills, if that is what you said, will remain uniquely human over the next 10, 15 years, and how can the young geoscientists develop those skills while minimizing cognitive bias, if that is what he said. So here's what I said. If you recall, I had mentioned a few things. I did say pattern recognition is one. That's the unique human geologic reasoning skill set that could take you far. even with the evolving of technology. I said pattern recognitions, and here's why. Humans typically excel. They excel at seeing subtle signals. They excel at emerging opportunities even before certainty exists. Something AI struggles to replicate fully. Humans excel. It's like a talent, it's a hidden gift. I don't know. But we are good at seeing subtle signals. That is, if we focus, if we do not run to the very big, bright stuff on the seismic, we excel at seeing subtle signals and even emerging opportunities. Another would be, like I've mentioned, integrative thinking. That's connecting geology, connecting geophysics, engineering, business context into the coherent subsurface and even the commercial narrative. That remains human skill. AI would not get that from you. Technology will not get that from you. Another that I mentioned was judgment under uncertainty. When we make qualitative or quality decisions, and we do so with incomplete or maybe ambiguous information, we should learn to balance it. Balance risk with opportunity. And you do so using what? Your intuition, right? Even your experience that is beyond AI's current ability can help you scale through. Another, like I'd mentioned, was maybe you shared the slide with them, I don't know. Another I'd mentioned was influence and trust. Translating technical insights into trusted decisions and even organizational actions typically would depend on human communication. You would agree with me, even our empathy and our leadership. So that's one. Then I think I mentioned learning agility. In other words, what I'm trying to say is adapting to evolving technology, business environment. And we do so by continuous learning, unlearning, relearning. It's our strengths. Innovating is our strengths. Now, he talked about cognitive bias, developing these skills, even while minimizing cognitive bias. I like that. Awareness and training is one. Young geoscientists should train. I'm not calling the experienced ones now, but they can. I mean, there are people that I know that are in their 80s that are still very active. So young geoscientists should train to recognize common cognitive biases, like confirmation biases, like anchoring and the rest of them, and question assumptions, learn to question respectfully, of course. Another will be collaborative decision-making. Always encourage, you're not a silo, you're not an island. Encourage diverse teams and even the peers to review your work. It helps to counter this individual bias, right? And to help broaden your perspective. It's good to use AI. I mean, use it. Use AI, but use it as a tool. Use it as a tool. Leverage AI to handle like data processing for you, pattern detection, maybe to an extent, but learn to maintain critical human oversight, because that's the only way you can interpret and give context to your results. If I may even say more, I would say structured framework. Learn to employ decision framework when you work. Incorporate uncertainty in the mix. Have alternative hypotheses. Come on, we're scientists, right? Put probabilistic thinking in your work. I mentioned, I think I did share a slide on P10, P15, and 90. Then another would be mentoring and experience. Learning from seasoned experts. Those who have modeled sound and those that have sound judgment, that are objective, right? Those that have, integrative thinking. It would help you increase your reasoning skill sets. And learn to have continuous reflection, right? Regularly review decisions, outcomes, review those so that you can identify biases, especially their patterns. And before you know it, you improve on your future judgment. So that's what I think. I believe that when you focus on these, for me, they are unique human competencies. And when you cultivate that disciplined, reflective practice, you can complement whatever AI is giving you. You can maintain that competitive edge we talk about in this space. All right? I hope that answers him.
Yeah, all right. Thank you, Vic. So I'll just go from the panelists. I think we have Professor Beth. You can unmute and speak, sir, before we go to the attendees.
I'm unmuted. I'm unmuted. Yeah.
Okay, sir.
Are you hearing me? Yeah.
Yes, we can.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Madam Vicky, for the presentation. I think you were teaching, or rather, you were pastoring. I think, it was a big campaign that you have launched. So thank you very much for that. What I wanted to, maybe you tweak your presentation, the topic. I think the topic should have read like, what you said is what the data is not telling us. I think it should be what we don't know or what we don't understand from the data. Because I think all those things are there in the data, but our current state of knowledge probably doesn't allow us to see all of them. And that is where there is room for research, and people who are doing PhDs and postdocs are working on some of those things in the data and making them, into areas we can understand them. So then another way of looking at your topic is you are talking actually about geoscience careers. I think your work with the MD influenced a lot of your thought process. Because you were in the corridors of the decision making, not just for prospect and drilling, but for general business decisions, because it helped you in your presentation. And the growth, the other way we put it is when you move from awareness to to mastery. You move from, you are interpreting maps. In fact, in Shell, when we started folding maps. You start folding maps before you can even be promoted to making maps, and before you can even propose a well. So you move through that ladder, and then you can quality control the data somebody has done, and then you can now further make a decision on whether the prospect is a drillable prospect or not. So I think that is another thing you have done. And for our new or people who are interested, this is a very comprehensive presentation, talking about the careers as a geoscientist in the oil industry. And even though that is not in the topic, but she really covered them. Most importantly, the uncertainties, because uncertainties govern our job as geologists in the oil industry. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Prof, for that contribution. Really appreciate. So I see Professor Idara's hand is up. I think we want to make a contribution, so I'll just allow you to talk. So please go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I want to say thank you for the presentation. The speaker spoke so well, and then the chairman himself made it smarter. I really appreciate it. I enjoyed the lecture. Now, getting back to the topic, what the data cannot tell me. Yes, not directly, but data is the foundation. Let me say, data can tell us everything. Some directly, others indirectly. Without the data, where are we bringing our imagination? There are some things we probably cannot see at the moment in the data, but they are there indirectly. Because if you give the same data to 3 different persons, they probably will give you 3 different interpretations. And so here we are talking about geological data. When we combine information from multiple sources, those informations are normally analyzed separately by interpreters. And so AI can detect relationships that may be too cumbersome or complex, or sometimes too weak or minute for others to recognize. And so instead of providing a single answer, AI can combine seismic, well logging, core data, production data, remote sensing, all manner of data brought together. AI can put all this together, fashion out the relationship, and then make some kind of, if it's something to be predicted, it can make some predictions, or it can give us confidence level. So where I'm getting to is that find there are uncertainties in the subsurface. There are also uncertainties in the interpreter. So my proposal is that different kinds of data, multiple data can be lumped together, and then the machine learning will give us a pattern. The speaker talked about pattern. Those patterns are what we are really interested in. For creativity, human thinking is superior. But for analyzing very large data, AI, MI, or ML will give us pattern. It's been a nice presentation. Thank you so much, Chairman.
All right, thank you so much, Prof, for that contribution. I think Alex Tucker wanted to speak, but he seemed, I don't know if he's still in it. He seemed to have dropped. Okay, so there's a comment here from...
Yeah, Chairman, I'm here.
Okay, Alex, you see here?
Yeah.
Okay, so...
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. Can I go on?
Yes, you can, sir.
Thank you very much, Doc. I want to sincerely thank the speaker of this wonderful, insightful topic. Victoria was our intern at NPDC in those good old days. And having met her as a student and listening to her talking about this topical issue, I was just too amazed. I said it would be unfair to just listen and just keep quiet. Very key things have been brought to our attention here. Some, I think, so many of us are already familiar with it. The area I want to really touch on is just to encourage us. Just like Prof said, our job has a lot to do with uncertainties, but we need to try our best not to just color things too much at times and just hide some of the things that will help in decision making. There are times interpreters try to even hide certain things that will mislead decision makers. It's very painful. You see fantastic geological features on maps. The drillers used to ask us in those days at the west side, your faults are looking fantastic, but we're drilling, we're not seeing anything. Those were the embarrassing moments. So please, as geoscientists, and especially those coming up, try to avoid hiding things, because even those uncertainties, you have to present them in such a way that they should aid decision making. So that at the end of that fantastic drilling is so expensive, the cost is not going to go down. So that when drilling is made, which is usually the final decision, the final things we expect about the success or whatever we have interpreted and everything we have put in, even if there's a failure, let that failure be appreciated. Let's avoid hiding what should not be hidden, because that decision, in most cases, will be taken based on what the interpreters have presented. So please, just to add to what, we need to be more professional in handling whatever we recommend based on the current technologies. No matter the softwares, there are certain things that we need to put that personal expertise in our recommendations to management, so that we don't end up even misleading management in taking decisions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. And yes, he was my first boss, my ever first boss. Thank you very much, sir. And I enjoyed your insights. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks a lot, Alex Tucker. We also have a comment from Marufdin Adabanija on the importance that data is the source of all. Thanks a lot for that contribution. Then I think, hey, Boaz, you want to make a comment? So we'll just allow you briefly before we move to the next agenda, please. Hey.
Okay, thank you very much, David. Thanks, Victoria, for this wonderful and insightful presentation. I just want to say, there are always data gaps. What is the scientific solution? Even your logs, there are always data gaps. And the only way for me to fill these data gaps is by me understanding my geology. And I think that is one of the things I want to take out of this presentation that was made by Victoria. As geologists, we must go back to our basic geology. Softwares will come, tools will come, a lot of things will come. But what matters is your understanding of your geology. And there's a need for us to go back once again to our geology. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks a lot for that contribution from Ehi. So far, all the discussions has been around integrating the concepts to make better use of the available data, whether the data has some errors, some limitations, but in terms of how much value we're able to derive from it. So I would say thank you a lot, Victoria Okorie, for that insightful presentation. Really appreciate your contribution and all the efforts you made so far to put this in place. So I will now hand over to the Owerri chapter executives to continue with the session.
All right. Thank you, our chairperson. Thank you, Mrs. Victoria Nneka Okorie. Believe me, I wrote a whole lot of things on my Jota today, which I believe I will take offline and I will discuss further. I believe all our students and young professionals learned a whole lot, from technical works to data analysis to business decisions, deep decisions in the O&G and other professional body. Thank you, Madam Victoria, and thank you, Dr. David. So please, we kindly request the PE, Dr. Antonio Former, to kindly help us to present these awards to our guest speaker, Mrs. Victoria Nneka Okorie, and also the chairperson. The PE, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. George. So, Nneka, you've really done wonderfully well. I must come. In fact, I wanted to say Professor Victoria Nneka, but professors in the house will bury me alive. So, Victoria, Victoria, you have done wonderfully well. Wonderfully well. In fact, let me be honest with you. Victoria, I was thinking while you were presenting this, I was just thinking, is there a way we can, replicate this in a bigger form, within the NAPE community? Because this is more of calling for a sober reflection on we geoscientists, on, the way we see our interpretations, all right? That the key is in our thinking, ability to convey the message to management on some of these studies and the results we achieve. That to some extent helps to, drive to logical conclusion, the eventual decision management takes based on the interpretations we have done. It's not really the software thing. I must say, some of us, we that work in the software industry, we always have that caveat when we send in, contracting process. We always have that caveat that the software is not supposed to be, in case you take any business decision that is not okay and all that, that it has nothing to do with the software. So trying to pull it to the company that the thinking, the geological thinking here is the major thing we're looking at. So having said this, just please, Victoria, think out of the box on how we can do this and have it presented to the bigger community. So on behalf of the Owerri chapter, Owerri chapter, NAPE chapter, I want to present to you this award of excellence for your outstanding contribution as guest speaker to NAPE Awka Owerri chapter, July 2026 technical business meeting. Congratulations, Victoria, for a job wonderfully done.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So the next, to my man, Dr. Dave, or David Anomneze as is called. I want to also appreciate you for taking time to be the chairman of this session. It's always been a pleasure working with you and listening to you. You've also done well, and I want to use this opportunity to say thank you on behalf of the national body and to present this award to you, a word of excellence, for your outstanding contribution to as chairman to the Nape Awka Owerri chapter for the 2026 July technical business meeting. Congratulations, Mr. David, and thank you for all you do.
Thank you so much, P. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yep.
So back to you, George.
Okay.
Vote of
thank
thanks.
you.
Can I take the vote of thanks at once? Or you want to say
sure,
something?
sir. You can, please.
Okay. So, like I'm fit. What I said during presenting the award to Victoria is almost the same thing I want to say here at the vote of thanks. So, Victoria, please think out of the box on how we will present this to the bigger community here in Lagos, because it calls for several reflection, like I said. It's something that we just have to look back, think in a relaxed atmosphere. This kind of presentation is something we can really present in a relaxed atmosphere where, interactively we are discussing and then trying to get the best out of it. So I want to use the opportunity to thank the Awka Owerri chapter for putting up this good show, this beautiful show, July technical business meeting, very, very eventful. I also want to use the opportunity to thank the speaker, the session chair, that's the chairman of the occasion. Thank all those who logged in or to this presentation. In fact, I was checking the attendance. I saw at a point 119. And I believe that this 119 is just not 119, because in a room, you could have 2 or 3 persons together listening to this. So my own projection is that more than 140 persons attended this thing. You know what that means? It shows that there was keen interest, there was interest to listen to this topic and all that. So I want to thank those who dialed in or logged in to be part of this presentation. Also thank our students who also were part of this. Thank you very much for finding time to attend this technical meeting, and then wish you well, and then safe I won't call it trip, because safe time back to your various businesses as the day goes on. Thank you very much and have a blessed day ahead. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Anthony Ofoma, the NAPE president-elect. So we'll move over to the announcements. And I believe the NAPE Publicity Secretary, Somime Oguntola, is she on the call, please?
No, she's not. You can go ahead.
Okay, fine. I'll take the announcement. My name is George Chizoba Okeke. I'm the Awka Owerri chapter YP coordinator. So the July technical/business meeting is still going on. We'll be having series all over the globe. We have the TBM in North America chapter, which is coming up on the 17th of July, with the topic of scaling opportunities for an integrated energy system, that is the petroleum and the renewables. So it will be holding in Hilton Garden Inn, Texmati Drive, Katy, Texas. So the speaker will be Susan Howes. She's the SP International President for 2027. Then on 14th, the Benin chapter of NAPE will drive us through the topic in optimizing 3D seismic survey geometrics using ray tracing and illumination modeling. That means transforming seismic acquisition from coverage-based to target-oriented design. So the speaker, Mr. Stanley Azokeze, who is the MD of Makes Energy, will do justice to that. Then we'll take to the Lagos July Technical Business Meeting, which is coming up on 21st of July, 2026. It will be held in Lagos at Latana Hall, Eco Hotel and Suites. They'll be taking us on the topic Shell Nigeria's Bonga Field, from discovery to over 1 billion barrels production, key to technical insights, milestones, and the path forward. So the speaker is Oludayo Fakunle. He's an asset opportunities and development lead in SNEPCO. So I believe we avail ourselves, listen, contribute, and learn from these our speakers who have the various wealth knowledge in the world of geoscience. So the NAPE 2026 International Conference is coming up, and we seek for sponsorship opportunities. It still exists in different categories. We want so big shots in the industry to kindly take up one sponsorship. So the registration is still on. The early bird deadline is on 1st of September. And we also avail us to try and register and also pay for the annual dues and register for the conference to be insightful. Please kindly register online. So we have the NAPE Summer School, which the deadline is on 31st of July. Please try to register. Believe me, this year's NAPE Summer School will be insightful, especially for our young professionals. So we have a fundraising drive for the purpose of a permanent NAPE secretariat. The account number is available at our secretariat. You have it on the slides in this platform. Please try to support us. I believe we'll get there. So we say big congratulations to one of us, our colleagues and friends who happens to be honored in APG. So say big congratulations to one of us, Dr. Ifan Yubi, who was awarded the Distinguished Service Award, and also Dr. Preston Dim, who received the Grover E. Murray Distinguished Educator Award, and Deborah EABC YP Exemplary Service Award. Congratulations to all our awardees. We are proud of you guys. So please, the NAPE dues is what we use to serve every one of us better. Please kindly update your dues and pay for this year 2026 NAPE dues. We have for the membership due, the students 2,000, active members 12,000, associate members 12,000, in the corporate members is 50,000. So please, we kindly call on Dr. Choma Madewesi, who is the Deputy Coordinator, Okorie chapter, for the closing remarks. Dr. Choma, are you there, please?
Okay, I'm standing in for her. She's having a network issue, yes. So thank you so much, everyone. Indeed, this has been a great lecture, not even a technical business meeting. It has been a massive lecture. But my book here is filled up. Thank you, Madam Vicky. We are so grateful to you. From the onset, when you accepted to be our guest speaker, despite the time factor, you're able to do this. We are truly grateful. We are saying thank you so much. Thank you to Dr. Dave. Dave, thank you for being there for us. We are grateful. We also thank our PE who have been on call from the onset till now. We are really grateful. Thank you for standing in for the Madam P and everyone. We are really grateful. Thank you so much. Thank you, Professor Beth Ozumba. Despite the fact that you are not in town, but where you are, with the time frame, you're able to join. We are really grateful. We are saying thank you, Prof. And thank you, Alex Taka, FNAPE. Thank you so much. You have done so well for joining us. Then we want to also commend Madam Adedoja Ojelabi, FNAPE. Thank you, ma, for being on call, and thank you for everything you have been doing for us in this Okorie chapter. We are really grateful. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, every member of the ESCO that is around. Thank you, all our members. Thank you, all Okorie chapter ESCO members. Thank you, everyone, for being on call. We are really grateful. What we are saying that come next month, join us in our next technical business meeting. You also see great things coming out from the eastern part. Now, one of us that got presented today, which is Victoria, has been given a blank check to present to the NAPID at large. That's what you can see from the rising sun. Thank you so much. All of us are really grateful. Thank you, Chevron, for allowing Vicky to do this presentation. If not that you permitted that, I don't think that she will be here today. So we are still grateful to Chevron Nigeria Limited for allowing her to do this. We are saying thank you to everyone. We are really grateful. May you stay safe in Jesus' name.
Amen.
Please, I want to thank Tunde. Tunde has been on call. Tunde, please forgive me. You have been the one that has been anchoring all the technical issues. Tunde, we are really grateful. Thank you so much for everything. You are, and yes, all of us are grateful. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. George.
All right. Thank you, our able coordinator, Dr. Chunko. So say a very big thank you to all the Chevron team. Madam Doja Jalabi, she has been FNAPE, she has been of tremendous help to the young professionals. Thank you, Madam Voco. You do so well. Thank you, our PE. Thank you, sir. We are really learning from your wealth of knowledge. Thank you, everyone, for joining us in today's technical business meeting being hosted by NAPE in Awka, Owerri chapter. Thank you all, and please do have a nice weekend. Thank you so. Thank you.
Thank you so much, George.
Thank you, everybody. Take care and stay
Thanks,
safe.
everyone.
Thank you,
Have a good day.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Wow. What a great outing.